Madam Chair, we are ready to begin.
Good morning and welcome to the June 9th, 2023 special meeting of the regular meeting of the San Francisco Ethics Commission. Today's meeting is being live broadcast on ndADcN and streamed live online at ndADcN.org/ethicslive. The public comment can be participated in person or may participate by phone or the web platform at its
Thank you, Madam Chair. Public comment will be available on each item on this agenda. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. For those attending in person, opportunities to speak during the public comment period will be made available here in room 400, City Hall. For those attending remotely, public comment period can also be provided via phone call by calling 1-415-655-0001. Again, the phone number is 1-415-655-0001. Access code is 25910373046. Again, access code is 25910373046, followed by the pound sign. Then press pound again to join as an attendee. When your item of interest comes up, press *3 to raise your hand to be added to the public comment line. Public comment is also available via the WebEx client application. Use the WebEx link on the agenda to connect and press the raise hand button to be added to the public comment line. For detailed instructions on how to interact with telephone system or WebEx client, please refer to the public comment section of this agenda document for this meeting. Public comment may also be submitted in writing and will be shared with the Commission after this meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Written comment should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Once again, written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Members of the public who attend Commission meetings, including remote attendance, are also expected to behave responsibly and respectfully. During public comment, please address your comments to the Commission as a whole and not to individual members. Persons who engage in name-calling, shouting, interruptions, or other distracting behavior may be excluded from participation. The following behaviors or activities are strictly prohibited during remote participation: applause or vocal expression of support or opposition, signs regardless of content or message, profanity, threats of physical aggression. The prohibition of signs does not apply to clothing, which includes signage pinned to clothing, messages displayed on clothing, pins, hats, or buttons. This provision supplements rules and policies adopted by City Hall, the Sheriff's Office, or the Board of Supervisors related to the decorum, prohibited conduct or activities, noise, etc., and is not meant to be exhaustive. Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, please verbally indicate your presence by saying aye after your name is called. Commissioner Flores-Fang?
Aye.
Commissioner Finlev?
Aye.
Chair Lee? Commissioner Salahi?
Aye.
Chair Lee, with 4 members present and accounted for, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Chair Lee. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here and a privilege to be here in this important role on the Ethics Commission. My background is in plaintiff's law on behalf of people challenging corporate and government misconduct, and I hope to bring some of those experiences as well as my prior experiences at civil rights organizations to this role in vindicating the public interest in good governance, avoiding conflicts of interest, following campaign finance laws, et cetera. So thank you, Chair Lee.
Thank you and welcome. We look forward to a really productive and busy. I'm also sad to report that Commissioner Michael Romano has resigned due to personal reasons. And I want to say that during his tenure with this commission, he has added very valuable insights with his experience, with his thoughtful recommendations, and diligent working with this commission as well as the staff. His presence will be missed, but we wish him really well with his other endeavors. Also, regret to report that Commissioner Larry Bush's term has completed, and Larry is Mr. Ethics. He was involved intimately with the creation of this commission, and throughout the last 3 decades, Larry has continued his involvement as member of the public and select committees to really work to make sure that San Francisco has an ethical, transparent, and accountable government serving its residents. Though he is no longer serving with us as a colleague, but I have no doubt that we will continue to work with him, to hear from him on ways to improve and strengthen this commission's mission and vision. So we also wish Larry well, and I look forward to seeing him at future meetings. Also, for members of the public, agenda item number 8 will not be heard today because the waiver request has been withdrawn. Also, agenda item number 9 will be continued to the July meeting. So for those of you who want to participate in these 2 items, they will not be on today's meeting agenda. Let's go to agenda item number 2, which is general public comment, not appearing on today's agenda. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak in the audience? I see none. Can you check on the remote audience, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one caller in the queue. Please stand by. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Great. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. David Pilpel, good morning. So just a comment, not on any particular agenda item, but about the agenda practices of the Commission. In my opinion, the agendas themselves should include not just the information that's there now, but for settlements and stipulations. For example, item 7 today, I believe the agenda could and I believe should include a summary of the material terms for proposed settlements and stipulations, and for items such as the waiver of post-employment restrictions, for example, items 8 and 9 on your agenda today, I believe a summary of the staff recommendation, whether to grant, deny, or grant with conditions such waiver requests, again, should also be included on the agenda in connection with that item. And that idea of a summary of the staff recommendation may apply to other types of matters before you. In my opinion, the public, and for that matter, members of the Commission or others, shouldn't have to wade through staff reports, and in particular, staff reports that then have an attachment to get to the end to get this important information. Has nothing to do with the content or the merits of any proposed settlement, stipulation, waiver request, or any other matter. Just that the information, I think, should be readily available on the agenda in connection with the item. Should be very upfront. Those are my thoughts on agendas. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, there's no further callers in the queue.
Okay, public comment for agenda item number 2 is closed. Now let's go to consent calendar. For items 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. As noted on the agenda, there will be no separate discussions on the consent calendar item unless a request is made by a member of the commission or a member of the public, in which event the matter shall be removed from the consent calendar and considered as a separate item. Colleagues, anyone wish to discuss any item on it?
Chair Lee, can I request that item 7 be added to the regular calendar?
Sure, okay. So agenda item number 7 is removed from the consent calendar. Any other?
I have a question. Maybe this is for Deputy City Attorney, Mr. Rusi, or anyone. Can I make general comments about items on the consent calendar without turning it into a separate item that requires separate public comment?
Commissioner, I think if you wanted to comment, are you saying you wanted to comment on a specific item or just sort of the calendar
A
process
specific item in the consent calendar, but not to delay proceedings and make a...
I think it would need to be severed for you to talk about it.
That's
so there'd be
fine.
separate
No
public
need.
comment on it.
Thank you.
Let's go to public comment, please.
Madam Chair, looks like we have one caller in the queue. Please stand by. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Great. David Pilpel again. So on the consent calendar, I just wanted to highlight a particular item in the acting executive director's report on item 5. So the question is, should I make comments about that now, or should I have that item be pulled and discussed separately? I don't know what your preference is at this point.
It's up to the chair whether Mr. Pilpel can give a comment on that item right now if he wishes.
Okay. Thanks very much. So on that, I appreciate the acting executive director's report, and I just wanted to call attention publicly to the budget concerns that are raised in that report, and in particular the chair's statement that was issued on Monday. I think it's a very comprehensive and careful explanation of the department's budget priorities and ability to deliver services in the next 2 years with the proposed cuts and the impacts therefrom. So I don't know if you want to talk about that today, but I hope that there's some more attention given to that. And I don't know if this was also turned into a letter to the Board of Supervisors, but some additional communications on this I think would be helpful, and hopefully some of these concerns will be addressed in add-backs by the Board of Supervisors, because in the event that the budget is approved as recommended, I think it's going to absolutely make it difficult to impossible for the Commission and the staff to deliver both the mandated programs and services under the Charter and anything above and beyond that that's useful to the public. So I just wanted to call attention to the budget and the proposed cuts. Thanks very much for listening.
Madam Chair, there's no further callers in the queue.
Do I have a motion to approve consent calendar item 3, draft minutes of the Ethics Commission May 5th meeting, 4, draft meetings of the Ethics Commission May 19th meeting, number 5, Ethics Executive Director's report, item number 6, Director.
So moved.
Chair Lee, if you can speak up a little bit on the mic. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and seconded to approve consent item 3, 4, 5, and 6. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Flores-Fang.
Aye.
Commissioner Fenlove.
Aye.
Chair Lee, Commissioner Salahi.
I, with the caveat, I was not at the May 5th meeting, so perhaps I should abstain from that vote. Okay. Then I. Yeah.
All right. Well, with 4 votes in the affirmative, it is approved unanimously.
Now, agenda item number 7, proposed stipulation, decision, and order in the matter of progress, San Francisco, Courtney Jr. and Shawnda Deane.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Lee. For the record, Pat Ford, Director of Enforcement. And I think we have remotely Zach D'Amico, who is the investigator that worked on this case. Just in case there are questions that I can't answer, he has a little bit more detailed information about this. But yeah, glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Part of this is it's my first stipulation, so there are some questions that I might ask that maybe are obvious to other folks on the commission, but I appreciate your patience and the helpful write-up. One of the background questions I had pertains to some of the mitigating factors identified. It's noted in the background report that the committee was not active from January 2017 to February 2018. I was curious if there was activity in the earlier period from April 2016 when it was apparently formed to through the end of 2016. And the reason I ask is just that the lack of prior violations was identified as a mitigating factor that was taken into consideration. And I wonder if there was not actually prior activity prior to these violations, then maybe that factor is neutral or not such a significant one to consider in the mitigation section.
Sure. It's always a little tricky with stipulations because we do have to kind of stay within the scope of what's here, only because these are facts that we've agreed to with the respondent. This case is a little different because this case actually did go through the probable cause process. The commission has already found probable cause. So the case was already public before this. But there, as far as I know, there weren't any violations that were found previously. If there were, and if they were within the applicable statute of limitations, we would have included those.
Okay. Thank you. I have an additional question, if that's okay, about one of the other mitigating factors is that the committee had contended that the redesignations in the case were not based on any intent to conceal, deceive, or mislead. And it looks like in the summary, the reclassifications didn't happen just once. It was several times in the course of less than a year. I was curious if the department staff and investigators had a view on whether that was a credible contention by the committee, or whether there was some other plausible explanation for numerous reclassifications.
Yeah, again, that one's a little tough because in this agreement, the way that we are describing this is that it was a pattern. And that's just apparent on the face of the forms that this committee filed. So I think that's pretty clear. It was something that happened multiple times. The reclassifications themselves were certainly intentional, and the committee intended to reclassify. They had to file a form to do it. This wasn't something that just happened on its own by operation of law. They proactively redesignated, and they did it multiple times. So we kind of stopped there in this stipulation. We did not go further to say that it was a willful in the sense they intended to do it in a way that was unlawful. So that's not what's reflected here.
Okay.
Just can I jump in just on that same point? I'm glad Commissioner Salahi raised it because all those series of reclassifications triggered the same kind of thought for me, as I'm sure it did for the staff, undoubtedly. But I do appreciate that the information was disclosed, albeit in the wrong place. So I think that's presumably why the staff kind of credited the indication that it was not intended to deceive. But I also recognize that it's important that material be disclosed in the right place. And I think the penalty reflects that. It's not a $0 penalty, which the respondents could have argued was appropriate, given that the information was in fact disclosed in the wrong place. So I think this strikes the right balance between a significant penalty while recognizing that the sums were in fact disclosed in the wrong place.
it was helpful that there was a very similar case in another jurisdiction we were able to look to, and that's the balance they struck. When we worked that out in this case, we felt like that was also appropriate here.
Thank you.
I have a question. How would the members of the public know that the report has been amended to reflect non-reporting during that period? I mean, do we have a special section to say these are the amended reports so that people can go in to take a look? Otherwise, people would never know about these stipulations or any other updated information, even though it's after the fact.
Right.
I mean, after the election.
So in this case, the respondents were not in a situation where they needed to go back and amend the forms. The reason is that the forms that they didn't file with the Ethics Commission were 24-hour reports. The reports that are due within 24 hours of the activity. And the purpose is to give voters real-time information during the election period of what's happening, and to give them that information before the 460s, the campaign statements, are due. So the respondent committee did file their 460s. So that information came out at the time when the 460s came out. It's not as prompt as when it should have been disclosed here at the Ethics Commission, which was within 24 hours. But it was on the record, so to speak, meaning that at this point in time, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for them to go back and file the 497s. The time when those were useful has passed. The committee has filed its 460s. The information about its finances is on the record. You can go back and see that. For historical purposes, it wouldn't add to that body of information to have them also go back and file the 497s. So this is different from a situation where a committee might, well, and I should say with the caveat, there's one form here where they did make a mistake on the 460, but that's a really small part of this case. Most of this case is about 497s. In a case where it was mostly about 460s, like where a committee never filed them or they omitted a lot of information, as part of the stipulation, we would ask the committee to go back and amend. Same thing with a Form 700 case. If you had an officer or employee who hadn't filed or had omitted a lot of interests as part of the stipulation, we want them to correct the record and go back and file. But that's not really the case in this case, just because it only concerns the 497s.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Just one other observation. That issue of the kind of intent, I think, is so important that I assume in this case and other cases, that is something staff probes very closely, and to the extent that there were indications that there was, I don't want to say scienter because that's not a useful term, intent to deceive, then you'd have a different situation. So I guess just reflecting what I assume is current practice and going forward, I think is an important issue.
It absolutely is. And I think you might remember with a recent case regarding Form 700 that we did argue an intent to conceal. And that was the basis for tolling the statute of limitations on that case. Right. So even though the conduct in that case had taken place 10 years ago, we said that the omission of the interest was intentional and therefore the applicable statute was tolled. So we definitely do check for that and investigate for that.
And I assume this is a first offense for both of the...
For the respondents in this case, that's correct.
And usually if they're repeat offenders, it would be reflected.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. That's one of the penalty factors in the enforcement regulations. And we always look at that. We go back through our records. We try to find if there's ever been a case involving any of the respondents. We'll also look back at other violations that may have happened that weren't caught previously. We'll try and do not a full review of everything they've ever done, but reasonably we will look back to see, did they comply with the law otherwise? And I think it's worth pointing out also that this case arose out of an audit that was conducted by the Ethics Commission's Audit Division. So first I want to recognize that this is like an interdivisional project. And it's good to see that enforcement matters do arise out of audits getting done. But also to point out that the audit did do a comprehensive review of this committee. And this was one of the findings. So they were looking at a broad array of things as they always do with their audits.
I have one more question, which I think is more of a general question. It has to do with how you go about identifying comparators to figure out what a proportional penalty is there a database that's easily accessible by members of the public or others to find those kinds of cases, or would you have to go back through meeting agendas and the like to identify those?
I will tell you, it's not like court decisions. They're not as easily accessible if you have something like Lexis or Westlaw. Every commission does a little differently. In large part, you do have to go to each commission's website and search through them. Each commission presents that information a little bit differently. I think we do it fairly well. We have a spreadsheet in ndADcN that you can go and search. So you can search by the respondent's name. It's pretty easy, and most commissions do a decent job of it. So it's not terrible, but it's not like Westlaw where you can go and punch it in and see like every jurisdiction. So there's a little bit of work involved.
Thank you.
Just on that point, I think if you're asking about the commission's own decisions, those are pretty easily findable on the website, right? But I think you're saying outside jurisdictions, there's no kind of joint database.
Exactly. And we approach it just like you would with, civil litigation. We look at the actual jurisdictions. We look at our previous enforcement matters first, take that into account. Then we expand it to look at other jurisdictions for persuasive authority. So it's not as binding on the commission as what they have to do, but it can at least inform a little bit how others have done it.
Thank you.
And thanks for being so thorough. I mean, breaking that down, it sounds like a lot of work. So I think
it is. The investigators put a lot of time into doing this, but it does really help. I think it helps with the respondents too, to help them understand the nature of the case. And we hope that it's helpful for you as well.
Thanks for flagging that this was an audit case. I think it's so crucial that we can leverage those internal resources and experts. So thanks to the folks who made that happen. I think it's a great sign of the importance of that kind of inter-agency cooperation.
Yep, exactly. We want to see a lot more of these kinds of cases moving forward for sure.
And we will. If there's no other comments, let's go to public comments specifically on agenda item number 7.
Please stand by, Madam Chair, as we check for callers in the queue. Madam Chair, it looks like we have no callers in the queue.
Okay, public comment for item 7 is closed. Do I have a motion to adopt item 7?
I'll move.
Okay.
So eager to go that I jump out of the gate.
I'll second. Do we have unanimous consent on this item? Okay. It's passed. Let's go to agenda item number 10, which is presentation and discussion of the Ethics at Work program implementation.
Good morning, commissioners, and thank you for your time and interest. My name is Peter Lauterborn, and I'm fortunate to have been selected to be the Ethics at Work program manager and able to pull together an amazing team of Aaron Fisher, Mary Brune, and Dick Carlitos, who's here today. And the work that we're doing is reflective of a lot of input from the rest of the agency, as well as our Deputy City Attorney, Brad Rusi, and his crew. So excited to share what we've been up to. The Commission has consistently expressed a lot of interest in this work and advocating for its continuation, which we're very grateful for and happy to share the fruits of that work with us. Could you put on our PowerPoint, please? There it is. Okay. So briefly, we're going to go through the content that we're creating, how we're organizing the subject matter, our efforts around departmental outreach, and then what is on the immediate horizon for the program. So for content creation, we are taking a broad multimedia approach. We know that people learn things differently. People are coming to conversations with different levels of work. Ethics at Work is designed to be a proactive education program that we're reaching out to people before they might think that they need the information, as well as making repositories where people can seek out that information when they need it. That means that people will sometimes be very familiar with some items, or it'll be completely brand new to them, even if they've served for a while. Or how does it serve people who have been recently hired or changed positions in the city? So we're trying to make content that will work across different media and at those different levels. So you can see we have a wide range of introductory one-pagers, videos that are both either short introductions or longer form content, position-specific guides, e-learning modules, and then a library that will be is under production for the website where people will be able to access that information as they need to. The subject matter is broad. We're aiming to cover most things that the commission will look at. And we're trying to organize it both for subject-specific content as well as position-specific content. And the reason for this is sometimes people will know what they're looking for. I fill out a Form 700. I need to learn more about the Form 700. I've been given a gift. I know there are gift rules. I need to learn more about gift rules. There are others, though, who might not necessarily know that issues apply to them. For example, somebody might know that they're a Form 700 filer, but they might not know how that impacts their responsibilities about soliciting behested payments. So we're trying to make materials that are both, again, subject matter specific, but also relevant to the role somebody might have. What's important for somebody who's leaving their position, somebody who's in a leadership position, somebody who's engaging in contracting or permit consulting. We want to make materials that, again, might be redundant. We might be saying the same thing about gifts repeatedly across those different media, but again, making sure that it's hitting the right audiences and that it's easy for people to find based on where they're coming from. Any questions so far?
No, please proceed.
Want to check in before I just keep going? All right.
I have one, but I'm going to hold it. I think you're going to cover it.
Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to cover a little bit here is departmental outreach. Originally, our mandate was to create content and get it out there. We've decided to take on reaching out to each city department, and we're doing so in descending order from largest to smallest based on their prior fiscal year budget. We're doing this, first of all, to make sure that people don't have to come to us, that we can go out to them. It's been a great opportunity as well to hear from departmental leadership, who's been so far very responsive, what their concerns are, what their interest is, and there's a lot of gratitude because there is stress around these rules. People don't typically want to be on the wrong side of the rules, definitely not by accident. And so they're seeing this as an opportunity to share issues that their department has had challenges with, where there's insecurities, and where they're excited to get more information. We're also going largest to smallest to hit the most people first, but also to find out what content will be of most value to most city employees and officers earlier. There's occasional guidance we get about suggestions to reach out to other, go out of order a little bit, but our plan is to basically have an initial contact with every department by the end of this fiscal year. We are following that up with custom plans that we make with the designee. What will happen is, actually, I'll go to the next slide to describe that. What happens is that we reach out to a department leadership, typically the person serving the executive director role or the different names for different agencies, general manager, whatever it might be, as well as any relevant deputies or higher level leadership involved in human resources, internal policies, or other relevant positions. They in turn will designate a lead. Sometimes it is the executive director. Sometimes it's the person in charge of human resources for their agency or something else. We then meet with those representatives and talk through somewhat of what I've shared today about the kinds of materials we're making and what those would look like, what would be most relevant to them, and how we're going to disseminate it. What do we need to send to all staff? What is only going to be appropriate for a certain number of managers, but it's going to be at a higher level, like an e-learning course? And we make that plan and how we're going to handle the production, who's sending the emails, how's it getting out there, and how are we reporting that data that we collect when those messages go out there. Following that, we share the plan with the department again to see if they agree with what we talked about, if anything new came up, and then they have the opportunity to either amend it, ask extra questions, or approve it. And once it's approved, we just start getting to work as far as collecting those contact informations for the staff, and we'll start sending those out. This is a snapshot as of June 5th as to what it looked like. We've done 2 groups, kind of batches of 10-ish. We've had responses at some level from everyone in Group A, and only one agency hasn't had a more formal conversation with us. We just started outreach to Group B, and that's going to, we've had a couple of those conversations with departments. We're started drafting a couple of their plans. And we're expecting to have more of these conversations in the next couple of weeks. And then from there, we're going to go out and go through the rest of the city departments that are engaged. So this has been a really engaging and really exciting thing to hear what people have to say. And it's an opportunity for people to hear from the Ethics Commission. Often they only hear from us when something needs to be fixed, there's a challenge, but this is a chance to kind of break that and really be engaging and listen to them as much as we're communicating to them.
That list right here, is that in order of size of department? So the top ones are generally the larger departments?
Yes.
Thanks.
I'm double checking to see if something might be slightly out of order, but I don't think so.
I was just curious.
Okay. So after that, what's coming up next is a number of materials are going to be completed. I don't need to go into detail here. You have this if you want to review it, but we've been waiting to have a critical mass of materials before we all put them online. We didn't want to go online with 5 one-pagers only. But we have all of our design standards set up, so material production is moving quite quickly. We're making the full suite of them, and many of these should be published in that library, the initial ones, later this month, and we will share that with the commission when that comes online. So with that, I wanted to keep this brief this morning, but happy to answer any questions or take any feedback that you would have. Or if we want to go to public comment, of course, you'd have that choice.
Comments, colleagues?
I have a couple quick questions. What's the process for making a training mandatory for city employees?
We're not generally engaging with that, other than there is a currently mandated training that we are going to be redeveloping. It hasn't been, it's been kind of put together as a group effort over the last decade or so, but we're going to do a full rehash of that mandatory one. Departments are, in our conversations, happily making this internal mandate. So for example, a common one is behested payments. That's not relevant to every staffer, but there are staff in every department who that is relevant to. That's a common one that they're saying, yes, we're going to assign this to people. It's going to go into the city's SF learning program. It'll be a required thing for them to take there. And our team is working with the controller's office to manage that system. So we're not doing anything across the board at this point saying, yes, we're saying everyone would need to make this mandated, but that's a department by department decision.
So any particular ethics training, it's up to the department, whether that's mandatory for that agency's employees?
Mm-hmm. We share our opinion on what we would recommend. And so far, I would say every conversation has been exceedingly accommodating. There's been no pushback. There have been frustrations about what some of these laws mean or how they've been interpreted by staff or, stress or confusion. But at the end of every conversation, people are saying, yeah, that's probably a good thing for us to assign to people.
Right. So it sounds like it's not an issue, but I'm curious if some department said, no, we don't feel like we need training on whatever. We have no mechanism to say, no, you have to. And that may be a hypothetical.
It's something we haven't really explored, and we wanted to, again, this is a proactive program. And so our hope is that we want to start with buy-in. If we start seeing patterns, that would be something we would include as far as potential next steps that we would look at. Hey, we're consistently seeing departments reject something that seems really important, or people in positions. I didn't want to give a hypothetical to suggest there is a problem. That would be something we would report and talk about a strategy for handling it if it came up. But so far, it hasn't really come up. Any department can decline to have this program, and that will be reflected when we do our reporting. As we just did, what departments are saying, yes, please do this, and what departments decline to make such a plan.
Got it. And then one last related question.
Please.
I think you noted at the outset that for non-city folks, not everyone may know that there's a law that governs whatever they're doing, like in campaigns, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a mechanism that those folks, maybe their committee treasurers, are they required to do some kind of training to be in the position they're in?
Mm-hmm. So there are trainings for treasurers and expectations for people to accept them. Ethics at work, at work being the operative issue here, this is primarily for internal city audiences and those interactions with city employees. That said, everything we are making is designed to work. If you are a member of the public, or maybe somebody who's interested in becoming a commissioner or interested in applying to a job, right? There's a wide range of audiences. We want the content to be relevant and interesting to people, even if they're not actually a city employee. Along those lines, we are working on maintaining our social media accounts, publishing videos online, making these things available, working with SFG TV to put our content in between the various episodes of commission meetings and hearings, so that those things can be accessible to people. And we do dabble in some things that involve, if you're seeking a permit, what do you need to know about gifts, right? And that's relevant for both the city staff as well as members of the public.
Got it. Great. Well, thank you for your presentation.
A pleasure.
Thank you very much for the presentation.
I have a couple of questions. Even though your primary audience is the city government family, for that, I think that, to follow up on Commissioner Fineff's comment on whether you can compel different departments to participate, even though you currently don't have that mandate, but through your other reporting, like, I would envision a annual scorecard, and what you've done by including those folks who are participating.
Definitely.
It would really show that, these are the folks who are really engaging, and whoever is left out, they could really, step up in the following year. So I think that there are other creative ways to really compel different departments. And I do think that everybody would want the departments to know the latest rules. In terms of setting your schedule, because even though ethics is now at full force, but you're still a very small department, and there are a lot of departments that you have to reach out to. So have you set up a priority on reaching out to different departments? So for instance, we know behest payment is the hottest topic within the city family. Have you considered which department may be more prone to really get up to speed on these new rules, so that you can reach out to them first, so that your time can be spent strategically instead of like just waiting for whoever wants to work with you?
It's a great question, and it's something we heavily considered early on when I came on board, especially in extensive conversations with the previous executive director. We did consider looking at the record of past issues that we maintain. Was there some pattern in departments that we should be prioritizing, or should we be prioritizing based on certain subject areas? We ultimately went in a different direction, which was to organize it by the size of department. And the reasons were several. One is other prioritization felt somewhat arbitrary, which is not how we wanted to approach it. The second reason was bigger departments typically means more staff or more contracting, right? There are some smaller departments that primarily do grant making, but they still have large dollar amounts going through, right? There's still a lot of opportunity for challenges. Or again, they might just have a lot of staff. And we thought it was important to get the most information out to the most people, which also means the most eyes. Many of our materials, particularly the ones that are position specific, for example, go into things about whistleblowing, both protections and how to report complaints, because we want as many people to know what those tools are and what their rights and protections look like. And as we looked at it, the bigger departments do a huge amount of contracts, businesses, grant making. They largely touched on the sort of things we would do had we prioritized by topic area anyway, and it just felt a lot cleaner to do it in this manner.
Because I was surprised to see Public Works in Group 2. Again, we're not discriminating against Groups A or B, but given the contracts, the permit approvals, and different things that could expose any possibility of undue influence, I would say DPW and the staff would welcome you to share with them the latest, gift rules, behest payment rules, so that they could be better prepared. So that's why I was asking in terms of your strategy in reaching out to, different departments.
Mhm.
Please take that into consideration.
Absolutely.
Because, they would welcome.
And they have.
Input.
We had a wonderful conversation with Public Works. They responded almost immediately when we reached out. And the difference between Group A and Group B was a matter of weeks. And our plan is to have our initial outreach to every department basically this month at this point. The gap between Group A and Group B was, let's talk to the biggest departments first. And part of it was checking ourselves, that we wanted to make sure that if were we missing the mark in how we even approach these conversations, right? So we did our first 10 or so conversations in Group A, and felt pretty confident that this system was going to work and was scalable to reach out to the rest of them. And so now it's going to it's Group B, and it's going to be kind of the rest from here on out, going very quickly. And so we're not talking about a period of not even months between these different departments being reached out to. And it's fortunate, I think only 2 departments have requested anything unique to their department. And in both cases, they're things we're going to repeat. So for example, we got a question about the specifics around accepting tickets to grantees events. And there are only a handful of departments who are in this sort of situation. It was a great point, and it's something we're going to make for that department, but it's going to be something we're going to use again. So writing the content is challenging. It's difficult to write things in ways that are nuanced and approachable, and also not so much of a summary that doesn't say anything, which is a line we're trying to straddle. We want it to be substantive, but still introductory when it's appropriate, for example. But it's not challenging to disseminate that information if there's a clear plan and buy-in from that department. So the work leading up to this time was to get that content largely developed. A lot of it is at this point. But we're confident that we're going to be able to hit all these other departments very quickly going forward.
And another question I have is, even though this is primarily focused on the city government family,
Mm-hmm.
but the larger
Mm-hmm.
city community really needs to be brought up to speed with all these ethical rules and procedures.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard regularly from the nonprofit city subcontracting communities that they're at a loss. They really didn't know, where things stand with
Mm-hmm.
them and how they should interact with the city. So I think that a part of your functions would really need to include, number one, reestablishing the relationship the commission has with the city service community, and also using this opportunity to really engage with them, to really bring them into the to the discussion, because we have other initiatives that we really need them to engage with us on. So I would suggest that you work with the folks who routinely come to our meetings,
Mm-hmm.
the nonprofit leaders and different community leaders. And the final thing I want to add is you did mention that some of the materials will be in different languages.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really important. I just want to add that you mentioned the 3 languages, and I would add Vietnamese
Mm-hmm.
as a key community
Mm-hmm.
that you need to really outreach to. So if you could include that
Mm-hmm.
in your publications and your social media outreach. And
Very well taken.
And one final thing is the role of ethnic media is so key,
Mm-hmm.
getting information to
Yes.
especially the isolated communities who don't participate in hearings, meetings such as these. So I would strongly suggest that you outreach to the ethnic media community,
Mm-hmm.
make a presentation. They would be gladly write up what we've been doing and what these new rules are, so that their members will be on top of, all these new requirements. So otherwise, great job, and keep going.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I couldn't agree more with the points, and we'll definitely follow up on those.
Okay, great. Let's open up for public comments.
Madam Chair, we have one caller in the queue. Please stand by. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. David Bilpel again. So first of all, I wanted to publicly appreciate Peter Lauterborn, who is a real city success story without going through his entire history. I think we go back to when he served on the Youth Commission a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Anyway, Peter's just a great person and really understands public outreach and the way city government works. So he's the right person for this program. Anyway, the budget concerns I discussed earlier very much include this program, which is greatly at risk at this time. I just had a couple of other thoughts. I appreciate the work that's been done so far. I hope there can be some focus on Proposition F, retirees that come back to work for the city, not to exceed 960 hours in any fiscal year, and how the various ethics, compliance, and disclosure rules and restrictions apply to them. I think there's a lot of ambiguity about that, whether returning to work for the city tolls certain post-employment restrictions, or it doesn't, and how gift rules and various other things apply to individuals that come back to work under Proposition F. And I would encourage Peter to work with Mo Woolley over at DHR to get a better handle on what information goes to city employees and others related to Proposition F. And then just finally, in terms of prioritizing departments, I understand in the first pass it may have made sense to prioritize from largest to smallest, but in the future, I would suggest doing outreach based on a risk management approach. So those departments that have more employees that are subject to work with contracts and or have a history of violations or have come to the Commission's attention, I think should be prioritized first compared to smaller departments or those that have less risk. So those are my thoughts on ethics at work. But again, thank you for the presentation and thanks for listening.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through the chair, and thank you, Mr. Pelpel, for the kind words. To share again, the points on retirees, that's wonderful. It hasn't come up yet, and that sounds something worthwhile. So we'll pursue making that sort of content. Again, on the prioritization, we actually got as far as making a matrix of every department, contracting, grant making, the number, whether or not they had a commission as part of their body, whether they were involved in elections or had elected members as part of their body, a whole bunch of risk factors. And it was a somewhat messy exercise because larger agencies inherently have large contracts. Even if it's a small percentage of their work, it's still a huge amount of their contract. And it was hard to weigh, for example, the real estate work of the airport compared to the grant making of the Arts Commission. When, how do you compare them in dollars? How do you compare them in staff time as a proportion of their work? And so it is an exercise we attempted a number of times, and it ultimately ended up looking like the budget list anyway. So it's taken in very good spirit, the comments about that approach. It's something we deeply explored. So I just thought I'd go into a little bit more detail about why we didn't pursue that approach.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Madam Chair, there's no further callers in the queue.
Okay, public comment is closed. Thank you very much for the really excellent presentation. Good luck, and we look forward to another update in a couple of months.
My pleasure.
Great.
See you soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Since no action is required for this item, let's go to item number 11, which is discussion and possible action on items for future meetings. Colleagues, do I enter suggestions for future for discussion?
Yeah, just briefly, for Director Ford, I'm glad he's here. I know that the enforcement is thinking about developing expertise among the investigators in particular substantive areas. I think as you're all doing that, it would be a huge service to the public and to us as commissioners to create very targeted, specific, like 10-minute, 15-minute, almost trainings at the public meetings focused on a very specific issue as the investigators develop those expertise. So we could have these kind of in the weeds on very focused issues on a day that's relatively light to help us kind of get in the weeds. And also by doing that process, we'll be creating public materials that are accessible for folks to get in there. So I'm just throwing that out there, not as an urgent matter, but in conjunction with the work that you're already doing. No need to respond.
Well, I would like to just suggest that the Board of Supervisors will be holding a budget hearing later in this month, depending on what transpired. Hopefully, we will have the entire enforcement unit intact. Otherwise, we may have another discussion on the enforcement unit. So let's hope for the best for a good outcome for the budget for this commission. Anyway, any other suggestions?
Yeah, just to continue the discussion around the budget. Thank you, Chair Lee, for your statement on that issue. I think it was earlier this week. I thought it was a very powerful and important summary of the challenges faced. I just want to take the opportunity to comment that given the significant work that the department staff has put into doing things like catching up on investigations, clearing the backlog, performing audits, et cetera, in the past couple of years, it seems to me that the proposed budget cuts, including potential reduction of staffing levels by 40%, would be an incredible setback that's contrary to the public interest here. And one of my concerns is that have the funding coming through other city entities that we regulate and are responsible for enforcing can create somewhat of a problematic structural dynamic. And one thing that I would be interested in hearing from maybe this is properly directed at the city attorney's office, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the context of this meeting or a future meeting, is whether the commission's authority under the charter to propose ballot propositions extends to self-funding mechanisms for the commission that would make our work possible independent of the budgeting process through the mayor's office and the Board of Supervisors. And the answer to that may very well be no, but it is something that I was curious about.
Maybe we can have a discussion after the budget is finalized. Okay, great. Any other? If none, let's open up for public comment on this item, please.
Madam Chair, we have no callers in the queue.
Okay, public comment is closed. Now is agenda item number 12. Additional opportunity for public comment on matters not appearing on the agenda pursuant to Ethics Commission Bylaws, Article 7, Section 2.
Madam Chair, we have no callers in the queue.
Okay. Agenda item number 13 is adjournment. I want to thank our newest member, Commissioner Salahi, who made this the shortest meeting we've had for a long time. We made it under 1 hour. So thank you. A happy weekend, everybody.
Thank you, Chair.